My son died 20 years ago. Last month I got a call from his number. He said, "Dad, I do not have much time." But he was buried with that phone. I placed it in his casket myself. The battery died 2 decades ago. The network does not even exist anymore. I stood there freezing while the line went dead. That night I drove to the cemetery with a metal detector and a shovel, only to discover that the grave was not the only thing that had been disturbed. My own family had been waiting for this moment to trap me. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight a war against your own blood to uncover the truth. The silence in my house was usually heavy, but tonight it felt suffocating. I sat at the head of a mahogany table long enough to seat 12 people eating a steak that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. 72 years old, a net worth in the millions, and my only company was the ticking of a grandfather clock. Then the landline rang. That sharp mechanical trill echoed through the empty hallway. Nobody called the landline. Not anymore. I wiped my mouth and walked to the kitchen wall mount. I looked at the caller ID, and my heart hammered against my ribs. The small green screen read, "Tyler Mobile." I stared at it. Tyler was dead. My boy died in 2004. His car went off the bridge on Route 9. I identified the body. I paid for the funeral. I watched the earth cover him. This had to be a sick joke. A scammer spoofing numbers. My hand trembled as I lifted the receiver. I did not speak, I just listened. I expected silence or a robotic voice. Instead, I heard static, deep and rhythmic like a heartbeat. Then a voice cut through the noise. "Dad, I do not have much time. They are coming." The room spun. It was him. It was the voice of a 20-year-old boy frozen in time, distorted by static but undeniable. It was the voice I heard in my nightmares for 2 decades. Before I could force a single word out of my throat, the line went dead. I slammed the phone down and hit redial. My fingers missed the buttons twice. The operator's voice was cold and computerized. "The number you have dialed is not in service." I dropped the receiver. It swung by its cord, hitting the wall with a dull thud. I remembered the funeral. I remembered the open casket. I remembered looking at Tyler's face, peaceful and pale. I remembered slipping his favorite blue Nokia 3310 into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. It was a sentimental gesture. He loved that phone. I watched the lid close. I watched the screws tighten. That phone was 6 feet under. It was physically impossible for it to make a call, unless it wasn't there. Bam, bam, bam. The front door shook under heavy blows. I jumped. I looked at the clock. 7:10. I was not expecting anyone. I walked to the foyer and threw open the door. My second son, Justin, stood there. His wife, Brittany, was right behind him. Neither of them smiled. They did not say hello. They pushed past me into the foyer, bringing a gust of cold rain with them. Justin tossed a manila folder onto the hall table. "We need to talk about the lake house, Dad," Justin said without turning around. He walked straight to the living room as if he owned the place. At 40 years old, Justin walked with the arrogance of a man who had never earned a dollar he spent. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first truck. Brittany was tapping away on her phone, not even looking up to acknowledge my existence. I followed them into the living room. My blood was boiling. "Get out," I said. My voice was rough. "I am not selling the lake house." Justin turned around and sighed. He looked at Brittany and rolled his eyes. "Here we go again. Dad, listen to reason. The market is peaking. We have a buyer ready to pay cash. You do not even go there anymore. It is just a rotting asset." "I do not care about the asset," I shouted. I looked at him, trying to find any resemblance to the brother he had lost. I just got a call from Tyler. The room went dead silent. Brittany stopped tapping on her phone. Justin froze. His expression shifted from annoyance to something else, something calculated. He let out a short, cruel laugh. Tyler. Justin repeated slowly. Dad. Tyler has been dead for 20 years. You know that, right? I know what I heard. I yelled. He called me from his number, the one I buried him with. He said he did not have much time. Justin walked over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder, but there was no warmth in it. It felt heavy, controlling. Dad, look at me. You are confused. You forgot to take your blood pressure medication again, didn't you? Last week you told the gardener you saw Mom in the rose bushes. Now you are hearing Tyler on the phone. Brittany stepped forward, her voice dripping with fake concern. Conrad, we are worried about you. Living alone in this big house is taking a toll on your mind. You are imagining things. This is exactly why we need to simplify your assets. Sell the lake house. Move you somewhere safer, somewhere with professional care. I slapped Justin's hand off my shoulder. I am not senile. I built the Blackwood Empire from a pile of rubble while you were still wetting the bed. I know the difference between a memory and a phone call. Get out of my house. Now. Justin's face hardened. The mask of the concerned son slipped for a second, revealing the greed underneath. Fine. We will leave. But Dad, if you keep having these episodes, we are going to have to intervene legally. For your own good. He signaled to Brittany, and they walked out. I slammed the door behind them and locked it. My chest was heaving. They did not believe me. Or worse, they did not care. They just saw an opportunity to prove I was unfit so they could grab my power of attorney. But I knew what I heard, and I was going to prove it. I went straight to the garage. It smelled of oil and old sawdust. I pulled the chain on the overhead light, and the bulb flickered to life, illuminating rows of tool chests. I walked to the back corner where a heavy steel safe sat under a tarp. I spun the dial. Right to 24, left to 10, right to 80. The tumblers clicked. The door swung open with a groan. Inside were the deeds to my properties, my will, and a thick black binder labeled Funeral Arrangements 2004. I pulled the binder out and blew off the dust. I carried it to the workbench and flipped it open. I needed to see the inventory list. I needed to be sure. I turned the pages past the death certificate. I found the burial checklist. It was a standard form from the funeral home. Itemized list of personal effects interred with the deceased. There it was. Item number 4. Nokia 3310 cellular phone. Color blue. Next to it was my signature. And right below mine was Justin's signature. He had witnessed it. He had stood right there beside me when the funeral director logged the items. I traced the signature with my rough finger. So the phone was in the ground. It had to be. I was staring at the paper when my cell phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text message. My blood ran cold. The sender ID was Tyler. I opened the message. The text was simple. Do not trust Justin. He knows the phone is not in the ground. I dropped the binder. The pages scattered across the concrete floor. This was impossible. If the phone was not in the ground, then someone had it. Someone was using it to torment me, or warn me, and that someone knew exactly what Justin had just said to me in my living room. I looked at the wall clock. It was nearly midnight. A rational man would wait until morning. A rational man would call the police. But I was not feeling rational. I was a father who had just heard his dead son's voice. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed the industrial metal detector I used for surveying land before a dig. I threw them into my truck. I was going to the cemetery. The drive was a blur of streetlights and shadows. The iron gates were closed, but I knew the service entrance around the back. The lock was old and rusted. One strike with a bolt cutter, and the chain fell away. I drove my truck onto the gravel path, turning off my headlights. The moon was full, casting a pale, ghostly light over the rows of headstones. I knew exactly where Tyler was. Plot 412, under the old oak tree. I parked the truck and grabbed the metal detector and a shovel. The night air was freezing, but I was sweating. I walked over the grass, trying not to step on the graves. I reached Tyler's headstone. Beloved son and brother. I felt a lump in my throat. "Forgive me, son," I whispered. I turned on the metal detector. The hum was low and steady. I swept the coil over the ground. I knew exactly how deep the casket was. 6 feet. This machine could pick up a coin at 10 feet deep. I swept it over the center of the grave where the chest would be, where the jacket pocket would be. Silence. The machine just hummed its steady, idle tone. I frowned. I adjusted the sensitivity to maximum. I swept it again. Nothing. No beep. I moved the coil 2 feet to the left over the empty ground. Still nothing. Then I moved it 2 feet to the right over the concrete border of the next plot. Beep, beep, beep. The machine screamed, signaling the rebar in the concrete. It was working perfectly. I moved it back over Tyler's grave. Silence. Absolute silence. There was no metal in that ground. No brass handles on the casket, because we chose the biodegradable wood option. But the phone. The phone had a lithium battery, copper wiring, a metal casing inside the plastic. The detector should have been screaming. I fell to my knees in the wet grass. The phone was not there. It was never buried. Justin signed that paper. He watched the casket close, but the phone was gone. Justin had been the last one near the body before the lid was sealed. He had asked for a moment alone to say goodbye. I thought it was grief. Now I realized it was theft. Suddenly, a blinding light flooded the area. I threw my hands up to shield my eyes. A siren wailed. "Put your hands in the air!" a voice shouted. "Police! Do not move!" I squinted against the light. 2 squad cars had pulled up on the gravel path, blocking my truck. Officers were rushing toward me, guns drawn. I slowly raised my hands. "I am Conrad Blackwood," I shouted. "This is my son's grave." An officer grabbed my arms and pulled them behind my back. The cold steel of handcuffs clicked onto my wrists. "You are trespassing on private property, Mr. Blackwood. We received a call about a grave robbery." A grave robbery. Who would call the police that fast? I looked past the squad cars. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up behind them. The window rolled down. Justin sat in the driver's seat. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and triumph. "I tried to warn you, Dad," he called out. "I told you that you were confused. Now look what you have done." They took me to the precinct. I sat in the holding cell, staring at the wall. I was not angry anymore. I was cold, calculated. Justin had put a tracker on my truck. That was the only way he knew. He had set this up. He provoked me with the sale of the house, knowing I was on edge. Then he waited for me to react. An hour later, the door opened. The station chief walked in. "Conrad," he said, shaking his head. "Justin is out in the lobby. He is filing a report. He is claiming you are a danger to yourself." He showed us the medical history, the confusion, the hallucinations. I leaned forward. "What medical history?" "I have not seen a doctor in 2 years." The chief looked uncomfortable. He handed me a piece of paper. It was a statement from a psychiatrist I had never met, detailing a diagnosis of advanced dementia, dated 3 months ago. My hands clenched into fists. Justin had been planning this for months. He had forged a medical history. He had baited me into the cemetery. And now he had the police report to prove I was unstable. "I need to make my phone call," I said. "Do not call your family lawyer, Conrad," the chief warned. "Justin has been talking to him for an hour. He is already drawing up the conservatorship papers." I nodded. I knew exactly who to call. Wallace. He was a retired lawyer who spent his days fishing and drinking cheap beer, but he was the nastiest shark who ever practiced law in this city. "Wallace, it is Conrad. I am in the downtown precinct. My son is trying to lock me away. I need you to come down here and raise hell." Wallace arrived in 15 minutes wearing a fishing vest over a dress shirt. He walked into the station like he owned it. He tore apart the trespassing charge, arguing that as the owner of the burial plot, I had a right to be there. Within an hour, I was walking out the front door. Justin was waiting in the lobby. His face fell when he saw me free. "Dad, I was just trying to protect you." I walked right up to him. "You took the phone, Justin," I said quietly so only he could hear. "You took it from his pocket before we closed the lid." "Why?" Justin flinched. A tiny micro-expression of fear crossed his face. "You are sick, Dad. We will get you the help you need, even if you fight it." I walked past him and out into the night. I did not go home. I drove to a payphone. I dialed a number for the one man who could find things that did not want to be found. Harlan, a private investigator who used to work for me. "Harlan," I said, "I need you to find a ghost. I need you to trace a signal from a dead man's phone. And bring your electronic sweepers. I think my house is bugged." Harlan met me at my house an hour later. He swept the rooms in silence. He found 3 listening devices, one in the kitchen, one in my study, one under my bed. He placed them all in a bucket of water. "They are listening," Harlan said. "Justin?" I asked. Harlan nodded. "High-end tech. Now about this phone number." He opened his laptop. I gave him Tyler's old number. Harlan's fingers flew across the keyboard. He frowned. "This is interesting. The number is active, but it is not a standard cell signal. It is being routed through a VoOP server. Someone cloned the SIM card signature, but the origin point is local." "Where?" I asked. Harlan zoomed in on the map. "The IP address traces back to a hardline connection in a building on Pier 40. I know that building. It is a derelict warehouse. My shell company bought it 5 years ago for storage. Justin manages that account. Why would a signal be coming from there?" Harlan closed the laptop. "Only one way to find out." I went to my gun safe. I took out my Colt 1911. "Let's go hunting," I said. We parked 2 blocks away from the warehouse. The area was deserted. The warehouse was a dark monolith against the night sky. We approached on foot, sticking to the shadows. We circled around to the back loading dock. I used a crowbar to pry the rusted door open. Inside, the air was stale. We heard voices coming from a lit office on the mezzanine level. We crept up the metal stairs. I peered through the dirty glass of the office window. My heart nearly stopped. Inside the office was Brittany, my daughter-in-law. She was not the polished socialite I saw at Sunday dinners. She looked disheveled, nervous. She was handing a thick envelope to a man with neck tattoos. I pulled out a directional microphone Harlan had handed me. Brittany's voice came through my earpiece, clear as a bell. "Find the kid," she hissed. "He has the physical phone, the one Justin missed. If he leaks what is on that SIM card, we are all going to prison for murder. Get the phone, then get rid of the kid. Do not let Conrad see him." Murder. They were talking about murder, not an accident. Tyler had been murdered, and Justin missed something. There was a second phone. Or the kid had the original. Who was the kid? The tattooed man took the envelope and counted the cash. Consider him a ghost. He grunted. He turned to leave. We scrambled down the stairs and hid behind a forklift. Suddenly my phone vibrated. Another call. The ID said Tyler. I stared at it. I answered it, shielding the screen light. Mr. Blackwood. The voice was young, breathless, desperate. It was not Tyler. It was someone else. Help me. They found me. I am at the bus terminal on 4th Street. The black SUV is circling. Please, you are the only one who can stop them. Who are you? I whispered. Just get here. Please. The line went dead. I looked at Harlan. Bus terminal. Now. We sprinted back to the truck. I peeled out of the alley, tires screeching. The bus terminal was 3 miles away. I ran 2 red lights. I did not care. Someone was hunting a kid who had my son's number, and Brittany had just paid a hitman to kill him. We screeched into the terminal entrance. It was a concrete wasteland of empty buses. At the far end, I saw a commotion. A black SUV had cornered a figure against a brick wall. 2 men were getting out, baseball bats in their hands. Hold on, I yelled to Harlan. I floored the accelerator. The engine of my heavy-duty pickup roared. I aimed straight for the SUV. The men saw me coming and dove out of the way. I slammed into the side of the black SUV. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. The force of the impact pushed their vehicle 10 feet sideways. The men scrambled up and ran toward a waiting sedan peeling off into the night. They knew better than to fight a crazy old man in a 2-ton truck. I jumped out, gun in hand. Is anyone there? I shouted. A figure stepped out from the shadows of the alcove. He was shaking. He was clutching a backpack to his chest. He stepped into the beam of my headlights. I dropped my gun. My knees hit the asphalt. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. The boy standing there was about 20 years old. He had messy brown hair. He had a sharp jawline. But it was his eyes. They were Tyler's eyes. It was Tyler's face staring back at me from 20 years ago. It was like looking at a ghost. The boy took a step forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an object, a faded blue Nokia 3310. He held it out like a shield. He looked at me, his voice trembling, but defiant. My name is Leo, he said. My mother was Sarah, and my father was Tyler Blackwood. Sarah. The name unlocked a memory. A girl Tyler had dated the summer before he died. A girl who had disappeared suddenly. Tyler never told me she was pregnant. I looked at the boy. Leo, my grandson. He was alive. And he was holding the key to everything. We need to go, Harlan said, grabbing my arm. The police will be here in 2 minutes. Come with me, son, I said to Leo, holding out my hand. I will keep you safe. Leo hesitated, then nodded. He climbed into the truck. As we drove away into the night, leaving the wreckage behind, I knew the game had changed. I was not just fighting for a memory anymore. I was fighting for the future. And Justin was going to pay. Every single cent. Every single day. The war was just beginning. I did not even have time to put the receiver back in its cradle before the front door shook again under heavy blows. Bam, bam, bam. I unlocked it and pulled it open, ready to confront whoever was disturbing my peace. It was Justin, my second son. He did not say hello, he did not ask how I was doing, he just pushed past me into the hallway, bringing a gust of cold wind with him. Brittany, his wife, clicked in behind him on her high heels, her eyes glued to her phone screen, ignoring me completely. They walked straight into my living room as if they owned the deed to the property. Justin tossed a thick manila envelope onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud right next to my half-empty glass of whiskey. "We need to sign the papers for the lake house," Dad Justin said without turning around. He loosened his tie, looking around the room with critical, appraising eyes. "The market is peaking right now. We have a cash buyer lined up and they want to close by Friday." I stared at them, my blood boiling. I was still shaking from the voice on the phone, the voice of my dead son, and here they were circling like vultures over a carcass. "I am not selling the lake house," I said, my voice rough and trembling. "And I am not signing anything. Get out." Justin turned slowly, a look of exaggerated patience on his face, as if he were talking to a stubborn child. "Dad, we talked about this. You never go there anymore. It is a drain on your finances. We are doing this for you." Brittany finally looked up from her phone. Her expression was a mask of fake concern. "Conrad, you know how expensive the maintenance is. We just want to simplify your life so you can relax." "Relax!" I shouted, my hands balling into fists. "I cannot relax. I just got a call from Tyler." The room went dead silent. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. Justin and Brittany exchanged a look. It was a look I knew well, a look of conspiratorial pity mixed with calculation. Tyler Justin repeated, his voice dripping with condescension. "Dad, Tyler died 20 years ago. We buried him." "Remember, I know he is dead," I snapped. But his phone just rang. I picked it up. "He spoke to me, Justin. He said he does not have much time. He said they are coming." Justin took a step closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "Dad, have you been taking your medication? You know what Dr. Thorne said about the episodes, about the confusion." "I do not have episodes," I growled, stepping back. "And I do not need medication for a mind that is sharper than yours ever was." I heard him. It was his voice. Brittany sighed loud enough for me to hear. She walked over to Justin and placed a hand on his arm. "Honey, maybe it is time we made that appointment. You know the one." Justin nodded, his eyes locking onto mine with a cold intensity. "Dad, if you are hearing voices from dead people, we have a serious problem. If this continues, we are going to have to look at assisted living. Maybe a competency hearing to make sure you are safe. You are not well, Dad. You are grieving a ghost, and it is making you dangerous." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. They were not just asking to sell a house. They were threatening to take away my freedom. They wanted to declare me insane. "Get out," I whispered, pointing a trembling finger at the door. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "Fine," Justin said, snatching the envelope off the table. "We will go, but think about what I said, about what we are doing this for your own good. If you cannot make rational decisions, someone else will have to make them for you." They walked out, leaving the front door wide open. I slammed it shut and locked the deadbolt. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. They were gaslighting me. I knew it. But a tiny sliver of doubt wormed its way into my gut. What if I was losing it? What if the grief had finally cracked my mind? I looked at the phone on the wall. No. I knew that voice, and I knew my son. I was not crazy, but I was in danger, and I needed to prove it before they locked me away forever. I waited until the taillights of Justin S. car disappeared down the long driveway before I moved. The silence of the house rushed back in, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with the echo of his threat. Assisted living. Competency hearings. My own son wanted to bury me alive just like we buried his brother 20 years ago. But I knew what I heard, and I knew exactly where the proof was hidden. I walked to the garage. The air was cold and smelled of gasoline and old dust. I pulled the chain on the single overhead bulb, and it flickered to life, casting long shadows against the walls lined with tools I had not used in a decade. In the corner beneath a heavy canvas tarp, sat my old floor safe. I knelt on the concrete. My knees cracked, a reminder of my age, but my hands were steady. Right to 24, left to 10, right to 80. The dial spun with a smooth mechanical precision that calmed my racing heart. The heavy steel door swung open with a groan. Inside was the history of the Blackwood family: property deeds, birth certificates, and a thick black binder that I had not had the courage to open since 2004. The label on the spine was yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear. Funeral arrangements. Tyler Blackwood. I pulled it out. The leather cover felt cold in my hands. I carried it to the workbench and opened it. The smell of old paper hit me, a scent of grief and finality. I flipped past the death certificate, past the autopsy report that listed blunt force trauma. I found what I was looking for on page 12, the burial checklist. It was a standard form from the funeral home, a list of personal effects to be interred with the deceased. My finger traced down the list. Suit, charcoal gray, tie, blue silk, watch, silver analog, and there it was. Item number 4, cellular telephone, Nokia 3310, color blue. Next to the item was a check mark indicating it had been placed in the casket, and at the bottom of the page were 2 signatures. Mine was shaky, a scrawl of a father broken by loss, but the signature next to it was firm. Justin Blackwood. He had signed as the witness. He had stood right there beside me when the funeral director logged the items. He had watched the casket lid close. If that phone was in the ground, Justin knew it. So why did he look at me with such cold calculation when I told him it rang? Suddenly, my personal cell phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration against my leg made me jump. I pulled it out. The screen lit up in the dim garage. New message. Sender ID Tyler. The phone almost slipped from my grasp. I swiped the screen, my breath catching in my throat. The message was short, simple, and devastating. Do not trust Justin. He did not bury the phone. I stared at the screen until the backlight faded to black. This was not a hallucination. This was not dementia. Someone was using Tyler S. number. Someone knew exactly what was happening in my living room 10 minutes ago, and that someone was warning me against my own flesh and blood. Justin lied. He signed the paper, but he did not bury the phone. That meant he took it. He stole it from his dead brother's outside body before the earth covered him. I closed the binder. A cold fury replaced the fear in my gut. I was done being the grieving father. I was done being the victim. I reached into the back of the safe and pulled out a small lockbox. Inside lay my Colt 1911. The metal was heavy and cold. I checked the magazine. 7 rounds. I slid it back into the handle and racked the slide. The metallic click echoed through the garage like a gavel striking a judge's bench. I was going to find out the truth. And the only way to know for sure if that phone was in the ground was to go look for myself. I grabbed my keys and the industrial metal detector leaning against the wall. I was going to the cemetery. And if the phone was not there, I was going to find out what else my son had buried with his brother. The drive to the cemetery was a blur of shadows and streetlights that felt more like an interrogation lamp than guidance. My old Ford pickup rattled over the potholes, but my hands on the steering wheel were steady as stone. I parked around the back near the service entrance where the fence was low and the shadows were deep. I grabbed the industrial metal detector from the bed of the truck. It was a beast of a machine designed to find rebar buried deep in concrete foundations, not cell phones in caskets, but I needed precision. I needed the truth. Walking through the rows of headstones felt like walking through a crowd of silent judges. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting long, pale fingers of light across the grass. I found plot 412. under the old oak tree just where we left him 20 years ago. The stone was cold to the touch. Tyler Blackwood, beloved son. I fell to my knees for a moment, the weight of what I was about to do crushing the air from my lungs. "Forgive me, son," I whispered into the darkness. "I am not here to disturb your rest. I am here to find the thief who stole from you." The guilt was a physical pain, a sharp twist in my gut. Was I a madman, like Justin said, desecrating his own child as grave on a hunch? Or was I a father fighting for the only thing he had left? I stood up and powered on the detector. The low hum of the machine was the only sound in the night. I adjusted the sensitivity to maximum depth. This thing could pick up a quarter at 4 feet. A phone with a lithium battery and copper coils at 6 feet should scream like a siren. I took a deep breath and swept the coil over the center of the grave. I moved it slowly, methodically, covering the area where his chest would be, where the jacket pocket held that blue Nokia. Silence. The machine hummed its idle tone, completely indifferent. I frowned. My heart skipped a beat. I swept it again, faster this time. Still nothing. No beep. No change in pitch. Just the empty static of dead air. Panic rose in my throat. Maybe the machine was broken. Maybe the batteries were dead. I took 2 steps to the right over the concrete border of the neighboring plot, where I knew they used steel reinforcement bars. Beep, beep, beep. The sound tore through the quiet night, loud and sharp. The machine was working perfectly. It found the metal in the concrete instantly. I swung the coil back over Tyler's grave. Silence. Absolute, terrifying silence. I swept it back and forth frantically, now covering every inch of the earth. Nothing. There was no metal in that ground. No brass handles on the casket, because we chose the biodegradable wood. But the phone. The phone had to be there. Unless it was not. Unless Justin had signed that paper, looked me in the eye, and lied to my face while the phone was burning a hole in his own pocket. The realization brought me to my knees again. He stole it. He stole it right in front of me. Why steal a cheap phone unless it held a secret worth killing for? While I was just about to reach for the shovel, my mind racing with 1,000 dark possibilities, when the world exploded in white light. A blinding beam cut through the darkness, pinning me against the headstone like an insect. I threw my hands up to shield my eyes, blinking against the glare. The roar of an engine grew louder, and tires crunched violently on the gravel path. Then a voice amplified by a loudspeaker boomed across the cemetery, shattering the silence. "Police, drop the weapon and put your hands in the air. Now!" "Get on your knees," the officer screamed. I dropped the metal detector. My knees hit the wet grass hard. 2 men were on me, instantly wrenching my arms behind my back. The cold steel of handcuffs bit into my wrists. "I am Conrad Blackwood," I shouted, spitting dirt. "This is my son's grave. I own this plot. You are under arrest for desecration of a gravesite and trespassing." The officer barked, hauling me to my feet. Then I saw him. A sleek black sedan pulled up behind the squad cars, its engine purring softly. The back door opened, and Justin stepped out. He was not wearing pajamas for a midnight emergency run. He was dressed in a sharp suit, looking every inch the concerned heir. He walked toward the police line, shaking his head with a performance of sorrow that would have won an award. "Officer, please be gentle with him," Justin said, his voice smooth as oil. "He does not know what he is doing." I lunged at him, but the officers held me back. "You snake!" I roared. "You set this up! How did you know I was here?" Justin looked at me with those cold, dead eyes. "I put a tracker on your truck months ago, Dad," he said, loud enough for the police to hear. "Because I knew this day would come. I knew your mind was slipping." The ride to the station was a blur of humiliation. I sat in the back of the cruiser watching the city I helped build pass by through wire mesh. They did not take me to a holding cell immediately. They took me to the chief's office. Chief Miller was a man I had known for 30 years. I built his deck. He looked at me now not with respect but with pity. That was worse. Conrad. What the hell were you thinking? Miller asked, leaning back in his chair. Digging up Tyler? Jesus. I did not dig, I said, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my gut. I was checking a lie. Justin stole Tyler's phone before the burial. I have proof. Justin, standing by the door, let out a heavy, tragic sigh. He turned to Miller. See what I mean, Chief? He is completely detached from reality. Earlier tonight, he told me Tyler called him. He thinks his dead son is making phone calls from the grave. Justin tapped his temple discreetly. It is the dementia. It is advancing faster than the doctors predicted. He is a danger to himself. I am not senile. I slammed my hand on the desk. Check the phone records. Check the grave. We are not digging up your son because you had a bad dream, Conrad Miller said sternly. Justin here is refusing to press charges for the trespassing, which is the only reason you are not being booked into county right now. But I cannot let you walk out of here. Not in this state. I am petitioning for an emergency psychiatric hold, Justin said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was meant to be heard. For his own safety. We need to get him evaluated before he hurts someone. The trap snapped shut. I heard the click as loudly as the handcuffs. This was not about protecting his father. It was not even about the grave. It was a calculated legal maneuver. If he could get a police report and a psychiatric hold on record tonight, he would have the ammunition he needed for the competency hearing tomorrow. He would get power of attorney. He would get the company, the money, the house. And I would get a room with soft walls. You are not taking me home, I said to Miller, realizing my only play was to stay away from Justin. Lock me up. I would rather be in a cell than with him. Justin smiled, a tiny, almost imperceptible quirk of his lips. It is okay, Dad. We will get you the help you need. As the officer led me to the holding cell, I looked back at my son. He was not looking at me. He was looking at his watch, calculating how long it would take to liquidate my assets. He thought he had won. But as the cell door clanged shut, leaving me in the gray light of confinement, my mind cleared. I was not confused. I was at war, and I had one phone call left. The officer slid the phone across the counter through the bars. Who are you calling? He asked. The family attorney. No, I said. I am calling the only lawyer in this town who has not been bought. I dialed a number I had not used in 5 years. Wallace. He was 80 years old, retired, and spent his days on a boat cursing at fish. But 30 years ago, he was the only man who could make the mayor sweat. Wallace, I said, when he answered with a grumble. It is Conrad. I am in a cage at the precinct. My son is trying to bury me. I need the shark. I will put my teeth in, was all he said. 20 minutes later, the station doors banged open. Wallace marched in wearing a trench coat over pajama bottoms and slippers. He looked like a nursing home escapee, but when he slammed his cane on the chief's desk, the room went silent. On what grounds are you holding? My client. Wallace bellowed, his voice filling the room like gravel in a mixer. Chief Miller stood up, looking tired. Trespassing, grave desecration, mental instability. Desecration. Wallace laughed, a dry, barking sound. Did he move dirt? Did he break stone? No. He stood on a plot of land he owns with a metal detector. That is not a crime, Miller. That is a Tuesday night for an eccentric millionaire. And trespassing. You cannot trespass on property you hold the deed to. He turned his gaze to Justin, who was standing in the corner, his face pale with suppressed rage. And as for the mental instability, Wallace continued, pointing a gnarled finger at my son. Since when does the word of a beneficiary trying to expedite an inheritance constitute a medical diagnosis? Unless you have a court order signed by a judge right now, you are holding a private citizen against his will. I will sue this department for every pencil in this building. Justin stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture that made my skin crawl. Mr. Wallace, please. We just want him safe. He was digging up my brother. I was checking a receipt I cut in my voice cold. And I did not dig. The grass is untouched. Wallace looked at the chief. Cut him loose or I start filing paperwork. Miller looked between the furious old lawyer and the slick young heir. He knew who the bigger headache was. Let him go, Miller sighed. The officer unlocked the cell. I stepped out, rubbing my wrists. Justin moved to hug me, the perfect image of a relieved son for the cameras in his head. I sidestepped him. I will take you home, Dad, Justin said, his jaw tight. I will drive myself, I said. My truck is impounded, but Wallace has a car. It is a Cadillac, Wallace grunted, and it smells like bait. As we walked out into the cool night air, I looked back at Justin through the glass doors. He was not looking at me with concern anymore. He was looking at me with pure hatred. He pulled out his phone and made a call, his eyes never leaving mine. He was moving to Plan B. Wallace dropped me at my front gate. Watch your back, Conrad, he said. That boy has hungry eyes. I walked into my silent, empty house. I did not turn on the lights. I did not pour a drink. I went straight to the kitchen phone, the only line I hoped was not tapped yet. I dialed a number I kept for emergencies. Harlan, I said when the voice answered. It is Conrad Blackwood. I need you. Right now. Bring your sweepers. And bring a gun. Harlan arrived 10 minutes later carrying a silver hard case that looked like it belonged in a war zone. He did not ask how I was or offer empty platitudes about my night in a jail cell. He simply walked into my kitchen, set the case on the table, and opened it, revealing a glowing laptop and a tangle of cables. Give me the phone, he said, his voice gravelly from years of chain smoking. I handed him my cell phone, the one that had received the impossible text message. He plugged it in, and his fingers flew across the keyboard. The screen filled with scrolling code lines of data that meant nothing to me, but everything to him. You were right to call me Conrad, he muttered without looking up. This is not a ghost. It is a spoof. Someone is routing a signal through a virtual server to mask their location. They are using Tyler's old number as a digital mask. Can you track it? I asked, leaning over his shoulder, watching the map on the screen flicker. Harlan did not answer. He just hit a key. The map zoomed in rapidly, passing the city limits, diving toward the industrial district. A red dot began to pulse rhythmically. Gotcha, he whispered. The signal is bouncing through 3 different countries, but the termination point, the actual physical device sending the message, is local. It is a hardline connection, not a mobile one. Where, I demanded. Harlan pointed a callous finger at the screen. The docks. Specifically, Pier 40, Warehouse 4B. I stared at the location, and a cold realization washed over me. I knew that building. I had bought it 15 years ago as overflow storage for the construction company. But when I retired, I transferred the deed to a holding company. A holding company managed exclusively by Justin. My son owns that building, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. It is supposed to be empty, abandoned, just a tax write-off. Harlan looked at me, his eyes narrowing. It is not empty, Conrad. Someone is inside, and they have enough tech savvy to clone a dead man's phone number and send you encrypted warnings. This is not a prank. This is someone hiding. Someone who knows exactly who Justin is and what he has done. Why would they be hiding in Justin's own property? I asked, trying to piece the puzzle together. Because it is the last place anyone would look, Harlan replied, closing the laptop with a snap. Or because they are being held there. But the text warned you against Justin, so my bet is on a mole. Someone on the inside who has turned against him. I did not need to hear anymore. The ghost of my son wasn't rising from the grave he was transmitting from a warehouse on the waterfront. And if Justin was involved, my life was not the only thing at stake. I walked to the wall safe behind the painting in my study. I spun the dial and pulled out my old service pistol, a Colt 1911. I checked the magazine. Full. I racked the slide, the metallic clack echoing through the silent house like a judge's gavel. I turned to Harlan, who was already packing his gear. "You driving?" I asked. Harlan nodded, pulling a snub-nosed revolver from his own jacket pocket. "I will drive," he said. "You navigate. We are going to rattle some cages." I looked at the gun in my hand. I had not carried it since the riots in the 90s, but tonight I felt the weight of it as a comfort. My son Justin thought he was playing a game of chess with a senile old man. He thought he could gaslight me into an asylum. He did not realize that by waking up the memory of Tyler, he had woken up the man I used to be. I holstered the weapon and grabbed my coat. "Let's go hunting." We parked the truck 2 blocks downwind from Pier 40. The salt air was thick with the smell of diesel and rotting fish. The warehouse loomed against the night sky, a jagged silhouette of corrugated steel and broken glass. It looked abandoned, a relic of a time when this city actually built things. But Harlan pointed to a fresh tire track in the mud near the loading dock. Someone had been here recently. We moved in silence. Harlan took the lead, his movements fluid and practiced. He bypassed the electronic keypad on the side door with a device that looked like a garage door opener. The lock clicked open with a soft surrender. We slipped inside into the stagnant darkness. The air was colder in here, heavy with the scent of mold and old secrets. My grip tightened on the Colt 1911. I was not here to negotiate. A single light burned on the mezzanine level, illuminating a glass-walled office that overlooked the empty factory floor. We crept up the steel staircase, our boots making no sound on the grating. We crouched behind a stack of dusty crates just 10 feet from the office door. I peered through the grime on the glass, and my breath caught in my throat. I expected to see Justin. Instead, I saw Brittany, my daughter-in-law. The woman who spent her days organizing charity galas and judging flower shows was standing in a derelict warehouse at 2 a.m. She looked frantic. Her perfect hair was disheveled, and she was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Opposite her stood a man who looked like a walking felony. He was massive with a shaved head and tattoos creeping up his neck like ivy. He wore a leather jacket that creaked when he moved. Brittany reached into her designer purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. She shoved it into the man's chest. It was heavy, cash heavy. Harlan pulled a directional microphone from his bag and handed me an earpiece. I put it in, and Brittany's voice cut through the static, sharp and terrified. "I do not care how hard it is," she hissed. "Find the kid. He has the physical phone, the one Justin missed at the funeral home. If he accesses the data on that SIM card, we are all going to prison for life. Do you understand me?" The large man opened the envelope and thumbed through a stack of $100 bills. He smirked. "Consider it done. But what about the old man? What if he finds him first?" Brittany's face twisted into a snarl I had never seen before. "Conrad knows nothing. He is chasing ghosts in a cemetery. You get the phone. Then you get rid of the kid. Make it look like an accident, just like the last one. Do not let Conrad see him." I ripped the earpiece out, my hand shaking with a rage so pure it felt like ice in my veins. Get rid of the kid. They were ordering a hit, and they mentioned an accident just like the last one. They were admitting to murder. But the question hammered in my skull. Who was the kid? Who was this person holding my dead son's phone, and why were Justin and Brittany terrified enough to pay a hitman to silence him? The pieces were moving on the board, and I was running out of time. I signaled to Harlan. We had to move. We had to find this kid before the killer did. We barely made it to the bottom of the stairs before my phone buzzed against my chest like a trapped insect. I pulled it out in the shadows of a forklift. The screen glowed with that name again. Tyler. My thumb hovered over the green button. This was it. The ghost was calling back. I answered, pressing the phone hard against my ear. Mr. Blackwood. The voice on the other end was not Tyler. It was young, high-pitched, gasping for air like a runner at the end of a marathon. Please help me. They found me. Who are you? I whispered, my eyes darting to the office window above where Brittany was still pacing. My name is Leo, the boy sobbed. I am at the bus terminal on 4th Street. The old one. I tried to get a ticket out of town, but a black SUV cut me off. They are circling the lot. I am hiding behind the ticket booth, but they are coming. Please, you are the only one who can stop them. Stay down. I ordered, my voice turning into the command bark I used on construction sites. Do not move. Do not hang up. We are coming. I shoved the phone at Harlan. Drive! I yelled. We sprinted to the truck. Harlan threw the silver case in the back and jumped into the passenger seat. I vaulted behind the wheel and twisted the key. The engine roared to life, a beast waking up angry. I slammed it into gear and peeled out of the alley, leaving a cloud of burning rubber smoke behind us. The bus terminal was 3 miles away. I drove like a man with nothing to lose. I ran 2 red lights, the horn blaring a warning to anyone foolish enough to be on the road. Harlan was clutching the dashboard, his knuckles white. They are going to kill him, Conrad, he said, staring at the GPS. Brittany paid for a cleanup. That kid is a loose end. Not on my watch, I growled. I floored the accelerator. The speedometer climbed past 80. We skidded around the corner onto 4th Street. The terminal loomed ahead, a concrete wasteland of empty buses and flickering halogen lights. It was a place where hope went to die. There, Harlan shouted, pointing through the windshield. At the far end of the lot, near a brick retaining wall, a black SUV was idling. Its headlights were high beams, blindingly bright, pinning a small figure against the dirty red bricks. 2 men were stepping out of the vehicle. They were not wearing uniforms. They were wearing dark hoodies, and they were carrying baseball bats. They moved with the slow, confident swagger of predators who had cornered their prey. The kid was pressed against the wall, clutching a backpack to his chest. He looked small, terrified. He looked like he was 5 seconds away from a beating that would end his life. I did not think. I did not hesitate. I did not touch the brake. I gripped the steering wheel until the leather creaked. Hang on, Harlan, I roared. I aimed the heavy chrome grille of my truck directly at the driver's side door of the SUV. The men saw me coming. Their heads snapped around. Their eyes went wide. They dropped their bats and dove onto the asphalt, scrambling away like rats. The collision sounded like a bomb going off. Metal screamed against metal. Glass shattered into a million diamonds. The force of the impact lifted the 2-ton SUV off its wheels and shoved it 10 feet sideways, slamming it into a concrete pillar. Steam hissed from my radiator. The airbag did not deploy, thank God, but my chest hit the steering wheel hard. I shook off the dizziness. I looked out the window. The SUV was a crumpled wreck. The path to the kid was clear. The men scrambled to their feet and ran toward a waiting sedan that peeled out of the shadows, disappearing into the night. They knew better than to fight a crazy old man in a 2-ton truck. I kicked my door open and jumped out, my hand gripping the Colt. 1911. Is anyone there? I shouted, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. From the dark alcove behind the ticket booth, a figure stepped out. He was shaking violently. He wore a faded hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. He clutched a backpack to his chest as if it contained the crown jewels. He stepped into the beam of my headlights, and time stopped. I dropped my gun. It clattered onto the asphalt, but I did not hear it. My knees hit the ground hard. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. The boy standing there was about 20 years old. He had messy brown hair that fell over his forehead. He had a sharp jawline and a chin with a small cleft. But it was his eyes. They were deep blue. They were Tyler's eyes. It was Tyler's face staring back at me from 20 years ago. It was like looking at a ghost. The boy took a hesitant step forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an object. A faded blue Nokia 3310. The screen was cracked, but it was on glowing faintly in the dark. He held it out like a shield, like proof of life. He looked at me, his voice trembling but defiant. "You are Conrad Blackwood," he said. It was not a question. I nodded, unable to speak. Tears blurred my vision. I reached out a hand, not to take the phone, but just to touch him, to make sure he was real. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice cracking. The boy swallowed hard. "My name is Leo," he said. "My mother was Sarah, and my father was Tyler Blackwood." I stared at him. Sarah. The name unlocked a memory buried under years of grief. A girl Tyler had dated the summer before he died. A quiet girl who worked at the diner. She had disappeared suddenly right after the accident. Tyler had been distraught. He told me she moved away to take care of a sick relative. He never told me she was pregnant. I looked at the boy. Leo, my grandson. He was alive. He had Tyler's face and he was holding the key to everything. The missing piece of the puzzle. The reason Justin was terrified. "We need to go," Harlan said, appearing at my side and grabbing my arm. "The police will be here in 2 minutes. That crash woke up the whole neighborhood." I looked at Leo. He was still holding the phone out, his knuckles white. "Come with me, son," I said, my voice steady now. "I will keep you safe. I promise." Leo hesitated, looking from me to the wrecked SUV. Then he nodded. He climbed into the truck. As we drove away into the night, leaving the wreckage and the sirens behind, I knew the game had changed. I was not just fighting for a memory anymore. I was fighting for the future. And Justin was going to pay. Every single cent. Every single day. The war was just beginning. Harlan S. Safe House was a reinforced basement beneath a dry cleaning shop on the edge of town. It smelled of chemicals and stale coffee, but it was the only place in Seattle where I knew Justin S. eyes could not reach us. I sat on a metal folding chair across from Leo. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, the resemblance to Tyler was even more haunting. It was not just the eyes. It was the way he held his hands. The way he looked down when he was thinking. I had missed 20 years of this boy's life. I had missed being a grandfather because my other son was a monster. Leo took a sip of water, his hands finally steadying. "My mom was Sarah Jenkins," he began, his voice quiet. "She worked at the diner near your construction site in 2004. Tyler used to come in every day for lunch. They fell in love, Mr. Blackwood. Real love. But they kept it a secret because Tyler was afraid of how Justin would react. He said Justin was jealous, that he was always competing." I nodded slowly. I remembered Sarah, a pretty girl with a bright smile. Tyler had mentioned her once or twice, but he never told me how serious it was, and he certainly never told me she was pregnant. "Why did she run Leo?" I asked. "Why didn't she come to me when he died?" Leo looked up, his eyes hardening. "Because of what she saw the night before the accident. She went to Tyler's apartment to surprise him. But he wasn't there. His car was parked in the driveway, and underneath it was Justin. The air in the bunker seemed to vanish. I gripped the arms of my chair. Under the car. She saw him," Leo continued. "It was 2 a.m. Justin was under the chassis with a pair of wire cutters. She was terrified. She hid behind a dumpster and watched him work. When he left, she wanted to tell Tyler, but she was scared Justin would hurt her too. The next morning, Tyler called her. He sounded strange, worried. He told her the brakes felt spongy. He told her he was going to confront Justin because he had found tools in his back seat that didn't belong to him. My stomach churned. The police report said the brake lines had failed due to wear and tear, a tragic mechanical failure. But it was a lie. A cut line looks like a torn line if you pay the right mechanic to write the report. Tyler knew, Leo said. He suspected his brother was trying to sabotage him, maybe just to make him miss a meeting or crash the car. But he didn't think Justin would actually kill him. But just in case, he started recording on his phone. He wanted proof of the argument. He went to meet Justin at the site, and then he never came home. After the funeral, Mom found out she was pregnant with me, Leo said, tears welling in his eyes. She knew if Justin found out there was an heir to Tyler as share of the company, he would come for us. So she ran. She changed her name. She moved to Oregon. She lived her whole life looking over her shoulder. I looked at this boy raised in fear, deprived of his family because of my son's greed, and Sarah. She died 2 weeks ago, Leo whispered. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast. Before she passed, she gave me her diary. She wrote it all down, every date, every detail, and she told me about the phone. She said Tyler always kept it in his inside pocket. She knew Justin would try to bury the evidence with the body. She told me to come find you. She said Conrad Blackwood is a good man. He will believe you. I stood up and walked over to him. I put a hand on his shoulder. Your mother was right, Leo. I believe you. And I am going to make sure everyone else believes you too. Harlan looked up from his computer screen. The phone, Conrad. If Tyler recorded the argument, it is still on the internal memory. We need to hear it. Leo handed the blue Nokia to Harlan. He plugged it into a specialized cable. We waited in silence as the software bypassed the ancient security code. A few seconds later, a list of audio files appeared on the screen. There was one dated the morning of the accident. Harlan clicked play, and suddenly Tyler was in the room with us. The audio crackled through the speakers, filling the small concrete bunker with the ghost of a Tuesday morning 20 years ago. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the metal table, so hard my knuckles turned white. First, there was the sound of wind, then footsteps crunching on gravel. Justin. It was Tyler's voice. Young, confused. What the hell are you doing under my car? There was a pause, a silence that stretched for an eternity. Then Justin's voice replied, smoother than I remembered, but with an edge of panic. Just checking the suspension tie. You said it was riding rough. Do not lie to me, Justin. Tyler's voice rose, shouting now. I saw the wire cutters in your hand. I checked the lines. They are halfway sawed through. You were trying to kill me. Give me the phone, Tyler. Justin's tone shifted instantly from defensive to menacing. Stop recording. No. Dad is going to hear this. He is going to know exactly what kind of monster you are. Then came the sounds of a struggle, a grunt of exertion, the sickening thud of a fist hitting flesh. The phone clattered to the pavement. The audio became muffled, as if it were lying in the dirt, but it kept recording. I heard heavy breathing, then the sound of a car door slamming and tires screeching away. The recording did not stop there. There was a jump in the timestamp. The background noise changed. It was no longer the wind outside. It was a low hum, the quiet, sterile hum of a ventilation system. I recognized that silence. It was the funeral home. I heard the heavy creak of a door opening. Footsteps echoed on a hard floor. A zipper was pulled down. You always were the favorite, Ty, Justin's voice whispered. It was so close to the microphone it sounded like he was in the room with us. Dad loved you so much. But look where that got you. There was the sound of fabric rustling, a hand digging into a pocket. Gotcha, Justin whispered. Cannot have you telling tales from the grave, can we? I will take good care of the money, brother. Sleep tight." The recording ended with a sharp click. I sat back in my chair, feeling like I had been shot. The air left my lungs. The room spun. The truth was not just a suspicion anymore. It was a physical weight crushing me. Justin had not just caused the accident. He had not just watched his brother drive away in a death trap. He had visited his brother's body in the funeral home. He had stood over the open casket while I was in the next room grieving, and he had reached into a dead man's pocket to steal the evidence of his crime. I closed my eyes and saw 20 years of memories flash by. Justin at Christmas toasting to Tyler's memory. Justin holding my arm at my wife's funeral. Justin sitting across from me at Sunday dinners, smiling, eating my food, living on my money. He was a monster, and I had let him live in my house. I had let him run my company. I had treated him like a son while he laughed behind my back, knowing he had murdered the best of us. I opened my eyes. The grief was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. It was a feeling I had not felt since my days in the army. The feeling of a mission. The feeling of target acquisition. "He thinks I am senile," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "He thinks I am a confused old man who hears voices." Harlan nodded, watching me carefully. "That is his leverage, Conrad. He is counting on no one believing you." "Good," I said, standing up. "Let him believe that. Let him think he has won. Because when a man thinks he has won, he gets sloppy." I looked at Leo. The boy was wiping tears from his face. He looked so much like his father, it hurt to look at him. But it was a good hurt, a motivating hurt. "We are going to finish this," I told him. "But we have to do it my way. Justin wants to declare me incompetent. He wants to prove I am crazy." I picked up the Colt 1911 from the table and checked the safety. "So I am going to give him exactly what he wants. I am going to go crazy. And I am going to lead him right into the trap he set for himself." I sat on the edge of my bed in the master bedroom. The house was dark. Dr. Evans, a man Wallace had trusted with his life for 30 years, handed me a small white pill. "It is a beta blocker," he explained, his voice low and clinical. "It will drop your heart rate and your blood pressure significantly. You will look pale. Your skin will be clammy. You will feel dizzy and disoriented. It mimics the symptoms of a transient ischemic attack or a severe episode of shock." "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this, Conrad? It is dangerous for a man of your age." I took the pill from his palm. My hand did not shake. I looked at Harlan, who was setting up the hidden cameras in the bookshelf. I looked at Leo, who was watching me with terrified eyes from the doorway. This was the only way. Justin needed to believe he had won. He needed to believe I was broken mentally and physically. If he thought I was a threat, he would keep his guard up. But if he thought I was a dying old man losing his mind, he would get careless. He would come here to gloat. And he would bring the papers. I swallowed the pill without water. "I am sure," I said. "Get everyone in position. Once I make the call, he will be here in 20 minutes." Dr. Evans nodded and retreated to the guest room, where he would monitor my vitals remotely. Harlan led Leo down to the basement. I was alone. I waited. 10 minutes passed. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My fingertips started to tingle. The room tilted slightly to the left. My heart rate slowed down, a heavy thumping rhythm in my chest. I felt weak, vulnerably weak. It was perfect. I stood up and swept the lamp off the nightstand. It shattered against the hardwood floor. I pulled the sheets off the bed, tangling them in a heap. I wanted the room to look like a struggle against ghosts. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. In the mirror, I looked gray. My eyes were glassy. I looked like a man at the end of his rope. I stumbled back to the bed and collapsed. I reached for the phone on the nightstand. I dialed Justin's number. I knew he would answer. He was probably waiting for the police to call him about my mental state. He picked up on the first ring. "Dad." His voice was sharp, impatient. "Where are you?" I let out a ragged breath. "Justin," I whispered. My voice sounded thin and terrified. "He is here." "Who is here, Dad?" Justin asked, his tone shifting from annoyance to suspicion. "Tyler," I said, letting a sob break through. "He is standing in the corner. He is wet." "Justin, he is so wet from the rain. He won't stop looking at me." There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in Justin's head. He did not believe in ghosts, but he believed in opportunity. "Dad." "You are hallucinating," Justin said slowly, his voice dropping to a soothing, predatory purr. "You are having an episode. You need help, I know." I wheezed, gripping the sheets. "I cannot take it anymore. I am so tired, Justin. I just want to sleep. Bring the papers." "What papers, Dad?" "The power of attorney, the house, everything." "I will sign. Just make him go away. Please, son. Help me." I let the phone slip from my fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud. I did not hang up. I let out a low moan, then silenced my breathing, forcing my body to go limp. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting. I knew exactly what Justin was doing right now. He was not calling an ambulance. He was not calling Dr. Thorne. He was calling his personal lawyer. He was grabbing his keys. The vulture smelled blood, and he was coming to feed. I lay on the cold, hardwood floor, my breathing shallow and ragged, just as the doctor had instructed. The front door burst open less than 15 minutes after I dropped the phone. Justin did not even knock. He rushed in his footsteps, heavy and frantic. Brittany was right behind him, her heels clicking sharply like gunfire on the floorboards. "Dad," Justin shouted, but there was no panic in his voice, only adrenaline. "Dad, where are you?" He found me in the bedroom. I was sprawled next to the bed, the sheets tangled around my legs, the shattered lamp scattered across the floor. I kept my eyes closed, my eyelids fluttering just enough to show the whites. I let out a low moan, a sound of pure misery. "Oh my God," Brittany said, her voice flat. "Is he dead?" Justin knelt beside me. He grabbed my wrist. His fingers were cold. He checked my pulse. It was slow. Thready. Thanks to the beta blocker, I was practically a corpse. "No, he is alive," Justin said. "But barely. His heart rate is dropping. He looks like he had a stroke or a heart attack." "Call 911, Brittany said, automatically reaching for her phone. "No." Justin barked. He grabbed her hand, stopping her. "Do not call them yet. If the paramedics get here, they will take him to the hospital. He will be sedated, intubated. We cannot get a signature from a man in a coma, Brittany." Brittany paused, looking at me with distaste. "So what do we do? He looks like he is about to expire right here on the rug." Justin stood up. He pulled out his own phone. I listened to him dial. I listened to every breath he took. "Strickland, get over here," Justin said into the phone. "Bring the full estate transfer package. The power of attorney, the deeds, the living trust amendment. Everything." "Yes, right now. The old man is fading fast. We have a window of maybe 30 minutes before he is completely gone mentally or physically. Just get here." He hung up. I felt him looming over me. I felt the vibration of his triumph. "Help me," I wheezed, forcing the words out through gritted teeth. "Tyler. Tyler is cold." Justin laughed. It was a sound that chilled my blood even more than the drug in my system. "Tyler is rotting, Dad. And you are finally joining him. He nudged my leg with his expensive Italian shoe. Look at him, Brittany, Justin said, his voice dripping with venom. Finally. It is finally done. 20 years I have waited for this. 20 years of listening to him mourn St. Tyler. 20 years of watching him build that company, knowing he wished it was Tyler sitting in the CEO chair. He leaned down close to my ear. His breath smelled of mint and rot. You know, Dad, he whispered, you should have died with him. You should have been in that car. It would have saved me so much time. I hated you almost as much as I hated him. My heart slammed against my ribs, fighting the medication. The rage was a firestorm. He just admitted it. He admitted he wanted me dead for 2 decades. It took every ounce of my willpower not to open my eyes and strangle him right there. But I needed the signature. I needed the confession on paper. Get him up, Justin ordered Brittany. We need him in a chair. We need him holding a pen when Strickland walks in. They grabbed me under the arms. They dragged me like a sack of cement across the room and dropped me into the armchair in the corner. My head lolled back. I kept my mouth open, drooling slightly. Clean him up, Brittany said, wiping her hands on her dress. He is disgusting. The doorbell rang. That is Strickland, Justin said, rubbing his hands together. Showtime. Wake up, Dad. You have one last check to sign. I lay there limp in the chair, listening to my son open the door to his accomplices. I was not dying. I was just getting started. Strickland entered the room like a shark smelling blood in the water. He was a small man with a nervous twitch, but his briefcase was heavy with the weight of my destruction. Behind him trailed a woman I did not recognize, holding a notary seal, and Dr. Thorne, the psychiatrist, who had signed my false diagnosis without ever meeting me. They set up a makeshift office on my coffee table, pushing aside the shattered remains of the lamp I had broken. I sat slumped in the armchair, my head lolling against the upholstery. Through my half-closed eyelids, I watched them prepare my legal execution. Dr. Thorne approached me. He shone a penlight into my eyes. I made sure to stare blankly past him, focusing on a spot on the wall. He is responsive to stimuli. Thorne announced, his voice bored. He is disoriented, but he is conscious. If he signs now, I can certify that he is in a lucid interval. It will hold up in court, Justin. But we need to hurry. His pulse is thready. Justin nodded. He looked at the stack of documents. The deed to the house. The transfer of the construction company. The irrevocable living trust amendment. It was a complete dismantling of my life. 50 years of sweat and blood reduced to a pile of paper waiting for ink. Get the pen, Justin ordered. Brittany scrambled to her purse and pulled out a heavy gold fountain pen. It was mine. She had stolen it from my desk. The audacity made my blood burn, but I kept my breathing shallow, my body limp. Justin knelt beside me again. He placed the document on a clipboard and held it in front of me. Dad. He said, his voice dropping to that fake, soothing whisper. Can you hear me? I let out a low groan. Tyler, I rasped. Where is Tyler? He is waiting for you, Dad. Justin lied, his eyes shining with excitement. He is right outside. But he cannot come in until you sign these papers. It is the rules, Dad. Sign the papers and I will take you to him. I promise. You want to see Tyler, do not you? It was the cruelest thing I had ever heard. He was using the memory of the brother he murdered to manipulate the father he was trying to kill. He was dangling my grief like a carrot. I want to see him, I whispered, allowing a tear to leak from my eye. Then sign, Justin said, pressing the gold pen into my trembling hand. Sign right here on the line. Then you can go be with him forever. I gripped the pen. My hand shook violently, not from the beta blocker, but from the sheer force of will it took not to drive the pen into his neck. I looked at the paper. The line for the signature was blurring. Outside in the darkness of the garden, I knew Harlan was watching the feed from the hidden camera. I knew Leo was there clutching the blue Nokia. I knew Chief Miller was listening to every word, his hand hovering over the radio to signal the raid. They were just waiting for the pen to touch the paper. They needed the act of fraud to be attempted. I lifted the pen. I let it hover over the signature line. My hand vibrated. Justin leaned in closer, his breath hitching. He was so close to the finish line he could taste it. He smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated evil. A smile that said, "I won." "Do it, Dad," he whispered. "Sign your life away." I took a deep breath. I steadied my hand, and I lowered the pen to the paper. The gold nib of the pen scratched against the paper. It was a loud, harsh sound in the terrified silence of the room. I felt Justin leaning over my shoulder, his breath hot and smelling of stale coffee and triumph. He was watching the ink flow, believing he was watching his inheritance become official. He saw the loops and lines forming, and he thought it was the surrender of a dying man. But I was not writing my name. I wrote slowly, deliberately. Block capital letters, Y-O. You. I paused. I felt Justin's body tense up. He was squinting, trying to read upside down. "Keep going, Dad," he urged, his voice tight with impatience. "Just sign your name, Conrad Blackwood." I ignored him. I pressed harder on the paper, the nib digging into the fiber. C-U-T. Justin frowned. "Dad, what are you doing? That is not your signature. You are ruining the document." I kept writing. T-H-E-B-R-A-K-E-S. You cut the brakes. I stopped. I did not lift the pen. I held it there at the end of the sentence, like a period at the end of a life. Justin stared at the paper. For a second, he did not comprehend. He blinked. He tilted his head. Then the words registered. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical blow. He recoiled as if the paper had burned him. "Dad," he stammered, his voice pitching up an octave. What is this?" "You are confused. You are writing nonsense." "Doctor, he is losing it again." "No, Justin," I said. The voice that came out of my throat was not the wheeze of a dying invalid. It was deep. It was resonant. It was the voice of the man who used to shout orders over the roar of jackhammers. I stopped shaking. The tremor in my hand vanished instantly. I sat up straight in the armchair, my spine snapping into alignment. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air, pushing away the fog of the beta blocker with sheer adrenaline. I dropped the pen. It rolled across the table and fell to the floor with a clatter. I slowly turned my head and looked up at him. The glassy, unfocused look was gone from my eyes. The confusion was gone. I looked at him with the same cold, hard clarity I used to have when I inspected a foundation for cracks. Strickland, the lawyer, took a step back, his briefcase clutching to his chest. He sensed the shift in the atmosphere. The air in the room changed instantly, from a hospital ward to an interrogation room. Brittany gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Even Dr. Thorne, the corrupt psychiatrist, looked uneasy, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Justin stood frozen. He looked at me and he saw the father he feared. He saw the man he thought he had buried under lies and medication. "Dad," Justin whispered, and this time there was real fear in his voice. "What are you doing?" I stood up. I rose from the chair without assistance, towering over him. I picked up the paper with the accusation written in black ink, and I held it up to his face. "I am not confused, son," I said. "I have never been more lucid in my life." "You are having an episode," Justin said, backing away, his eyes darting to the door. "You are paranoid. That is what the doctor said." "Paranoia." I took a step toward him, forcing him back against the wall. "I am not paranoid, Justin. I am informed." I leaned in close. I wanted to see the pupils of his eyes dilate. I wanted to smell his fear. "I have a question for you, Justin," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And I want you to answer me honestly before the world comes crashing down on you. How did it feel?" Justin swallowed hard, his Adam S. apple bobbing. "How did what feel, Dad?" "How did it feel to stand there by the roadside?" I hissed. "How did it feel to watch your own brother bleed to death in the wreckage of his car, knowing you could have saved him, but you chose to steal his phone instead of calling 911? Justin stammered, his back pressing against the wall, as if he were trying to merge with the plaster. He opened his mouth to spin another lie, to tell me I was confused again, but I did not give him the chance. I reached out and grabbed the glass of water from the side table, the only thing Brittany had offered me during my supposed dying moments. I hurled it against the far wall. The glass shattered with a violence that made everyone in the room jump. Shards rained down onto the hardwood floor like diamonds. That was the signal. The door to the guest bedroom, which Justin had assumed was empty, swung open slowly. A figure stepped out from the shadows into the dim light of the hallway. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt, the kind Tyler used to wear on weekends, and jeans that had seen better days. He walked with a heavy, deliberate gait. Justin spun around toward the noise. When his eyes landed on the boy, his knees buckled. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. He let out a sound that was not human. It was a high-pitched shriek of pure primal terror. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, and crashing into the bookshelf, knocking over a vase. "Tyler," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Oh God, no! Tyler, stay back! You are dead! I saw you die." Brittany let out a gasp that sounded like she was choking. Her hands flew to her mouth, and she dropped her designer purse. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, spilling lipstick keys and a compact mirror across the rug. She stared at the boy with wide, terrified eyes, her body shaking so violently her jewelry rattled. Even the corrupt doctor and the lawyer looked pale, sensing that the situation had spiraled into something supernatural. But it was not a ghost. It was flesh and blood. Leo walked into the center of the living room. He did not look at the lawyers. He did not look at me. He looked straight at the man who killed his father. In his right hand he held a small blue object, an ancient piece of technology that looked like a toy compared to the smartphones on the table. A Nokia 3310. "Hello, Uncle Justin," Leo said. His voice was steady, colder than I expected from a boy of 20. "My dad sends his regards." Justin was hyperventilating on the floor, clawing at the rug, trying to scramble away from the vision of his dead brother. "Who are you?" He gasped, tears streaming down his face. "What are you?" Leo did not answer. He just lifted the phone. He pressed a button with his thumb. The speaker crackled to life. In the silence of that room, with the lawyer and the doctor watching in stunned confusion, the voice of a dead man spoke the truth for the first time in 2 decades. "Justin, stop. Put the cutters down. You are going to kill someone." The recording continued, playing the sounds of the struggle, the thud of the phone hitting the ground, and then finally the voice of Justin himself whispering over the body. "Sleep tight, brother. I will take good care of the money." The audio ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Justin stopped screaming. He looked from the phone to Leo and then to me, realizing finally that he was not facing a ghost. He was facing a witness. The recording ended, and for a second, the only sound in the room was Justin's ragged breathing. Then he snapped. The realization that his life was over hit him all at once, and he turned into a wild animal. He did not care about the lawyer or the doctor or even me. He only saw the blue phone in Leo's hand. "Give it to me," he screamed, his face twisting into a mask of pure hate. He lunged across the room, his fingers hooked into claws reaching for the only evidence that could hang him. Leo flinched, stepping back against the fireplace, but he did not have to fight. I moved faster than I had in 20 years. The fog of the beta blocker was gone, burned away by the fire in my blood. I stepped between my grandson and the monster I had raised. I did not shove him. I did not hold him back. I planted my feet on the hardwood floor and threw a right hook with every ounce of strength I had left. It was a punch fueled by 2 decades of grief. It connected with his jaw with a sickening crack. Justin crumpled like a paper doll. He hit the floor hard, sliding across the rug until he stopped at the feet of his horrified lawyer. He spat blood and looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock. "That was for Tyler," I said, my voice low and steady. "And for every day you smiled in my face while his blood was on your hands." Brittany shrieked. She looked at her husband bleeding on the floor, then at the hallway leading to the back exit. She did not rush to help him. She did not ask if he was okay. She kicked off her expensive heels and ran for the kitchen. She was abandoning the ship she helped sink. She made it to the doorway before a shadow stepped out to meet her. Harlan blocked her path, his arms crossed over his chest, his face impassive. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his voice calm. "The party is just getting started." Brittany backed away, trembling, her hands raising in surrender as she realized she was trapped. Justin pushed himself up on one elbow, blood dripping from his chin. "You cannot prove that recording is real." He spat, his words slurred. "It is 20 years old. It is corrupted. You are a senile old man. No jury will believe a word of this." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my smartphone. I tapped the screen and cast the video to the large television mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life. It was the grainy night vision footage from the warehouse just 48 hours ago. Brittany's face filled the screen, illuminated by the harsh overhead lights of the office. She was handing the thick envelope to the hitman. "Get rid of the kid," her recorded voice hissed, filling the living room. "Make it look like an accident, just like the last one." The color drained from Strickland's face. He snapped his briefcase shut and backed away toward the wall, trying to distance himself from his clients. Dr. Thorne looked like he was about to be sick. "You did not just kill my son," I said, staring down at Justin. "You tried to kill my grandson, too. You hired a hitman to murder a boy you did not even know, just to keep your secrets buried. That is not a white-collar crime, Justin. That is capital murder." Brittany slid down the wall, sobbing into her hands. "It was not me," she wailed. "He made me do it. It was all his idea." Justin roared a sound of pure frustration and rage, but before he could stand up, the world outside exploded. Red and blue lights flashed through the sheer curtains, turning the living room into a chaotic strobe light show. The wail of sirens cut through the night, deafening and close, coming from every direction. The front door, which Justin had left unlocked for his victory lap, flew open with a crash. Chief Miller walked in, his service weapon drawn, followed by a team of officers in tactical gear. The room was instantly filled with the shouts of police commands, but I did not hear them. I just looked at my son, and I felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of justice. Chief Miller did not hesitate. He holstered his weapon and moved in with the efficiency of a man who had been waiting for this moment. 2 officers grabbed Justin by the arms and slammed him chest first onto the hardwood floor. The impact shook the room, rattling the crystal in the cabinets. Justin thrashed against the weight of the law, his expensive suit tearing at the shoulder. He was not screaming in fear anymore. He was screaming in pure, unadulterated entitlement. "It is mine," he roared, his face pressed against the rug, saliva flying from his lips. "It is all mine. I earned it. I ran the company while you sat in this house mourning a ghost. You old bastard, you should have died 20 years ago. You should have been in that car with him." I walked over to where he was pinned. I looked down at the son I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man who had murdered his own brother for a paycheck. I felt nothing. No love, no pity, just a cold finality like concrete setting in a mold. "You earned nothing," I said, my voice cutting through his screams. "You stole, you lied, and you killed. And now you have lost. You will never see a dime of the Blackwood fortune, Justin. Not a single cent. I would burn this house to the ground and scatter the ashes in the wind before I let you touch it." Justin let out a guttural howl of rage as the handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists. It was the sound of a predator realizing he had become the prey. Across the room, the rest of the conspiracy was falling apart. Strickland the lawyer tried to invoke his rights, puffing out his chest, but an officer spun him around and cuffed him before he could finish his sentence. Dr. Thorne, the man who had signed my life away without ever meeting me, looked small and pathetic. As he was led away, his head hung low in shame. Brittany was the loudest. As they dragged her toward the door, she kicked and screamed, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "I have money," she shrieked. "I can pay you. Let me go." It was not my idea. He made me do it. I watched them go. I watched my son being hauled out of the house he grew up, in the house he wanted to steal. He twisted his head back to look at me one last time, his eyes burning with a hatred so intense it almost had a physical weight. "I hope you rot, Dad," he spat, as they shoved him through the doorway. "I hope you die alone in this big, empty house." The door slammed shut, cutting off his voice. The shouts of the officers faded. The sirens wailed as they drove away, receding into the distance, until they were just a faint hum in the night. Silence rushed back into the room, filling the space where the chaos had been. But it was not the heavy, suffocating silence of the last 20 years. It was a clean silence. The air felt lighter. I looked around the living room. The shattered glass. The scattered papers. The empty chair where the lawyer had sat. It was over. The tumor that had been poisoning my life had been cut out. I turned to the fireplace. Leo was standing there, clutching the blue Nokia phone to his chest. He looked terrified, exhausted, and incredibly young. He was staring at the door where his uncle had just been dragged away. I walked over to him. My legs felt heavy, the adrenaline finally fading, leaving me with a bone-deep weariness. But I stood tall. "Are you okay, son?" I asked softly. Leo looked at me. His eyes, Tyler's eyes, were wide. "Is it over?" he whispered. I looked at the phone in his hand, the evidence that had saved us both. "Yes," I said. "It is over. They can never hurt us again." For the first time in 20 years, the house did not feel empty. There were two of us now, and we had a lot of work to do. The house was finally quiet, but sleep was impossible. The adrenaline that had fueled my fist was replaced by a gnawing anxiety. I knew Leo was Tyler's son. I saw it in his eyes. I heard it in his voice. I felt it in the marrow of my bones. But in the world of law and inheritance, feelings do not count. Only facts matter. And if we were going to bury Justin under a mountain of evidence, we needed the science to be indisputable. We needed to be bulletproof. I called a private genetic lab at 3 a.m. Money buys silence, but more importantly, it buys speed. A technician arrived before dawn, looking tired but professional. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Justin had tried to steal my life just hours before. The technician swabbed the inside of my cheek, then Leo's. It was a sterile clinical process that felt strangely momentous. We were harvesting the truth. The results came back 12 hours later. It was the longest morning of my life. Leo paced the living room floor, walking the same path Tyler used to walk when he was nervous about an exam. I sat in my armchair, staring at the tablet screen, waiting for the notification. When the email finally pinged, the sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. Leo froze mid-step. He looked at me, his face pale. He was terrified that maybe he had been wrong, that maybe his mother had lied, that maybe he was just a stranger with a coincidental face. I opened the file. I scrolled past the medical jargon, the genetic markers, the alleles. I went straight to the bottom of the page. The conclusion was printed in bold black text. Probability of grandparentage 99.999%. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The air rushed out of my lungs, and with it went 20 years of doubt. I set the tablet down on the table. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my heart was full. "It is true," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You are him. You are really him." Leo slumped against the wall as if his strings had been cut. He let out a sob of relief. I watched him, and I saw the terrified boy who had been running for his life. I saw the son who had lost his mother. I saw the last piece of Tyler left in this world. I walked over to him. I did not offer him a handshake. I did not pat him on the back. I pulled him into my arms and I held him tight. He stiffened for a second, then he melted. He buried his face in my shoulder and wept. I held the back of his head, my fingers tangling in hair that felt just like his father's. I stood there in the middle of the ruined living room hugging my grandson. I thought about the trade I had made. I had lost a son the night before. I had watched Justin be dragged away in handcuffs, a monster of my own making. It should have broken me. But as I held Leo, I realized the universe had balanced the scales. I had lost a bad son, but I had found a good man. I had found the future. "Welcome home, Leo," I whispered into his ear. "You are safe now. Nobody is ever going to hurt you again." We stood there for a long time until the phone rang again. It was Wallace. The sentimentality of the moment had to be shelved. The war was moving to a new battlefield. Justin had pleaded not guilty at his arraignment. He was claiming insanity, claiming entrapment, claiming the recording was a deepfake. He was going to fight dirty. I pulled away from Leo and wiped my eyes. I looked at him and saw the steel underneath the tears. "Get your coat, son," I said, picking up the tablet with the DNA results. "We have a court date, and we are going to make sure they never see the light of day again." The courtroom was packed. There was not an empty seat in the gallery. People love a tragedy, especially when it involves a wealthy family tearing itself apart on public record. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Wallace. Leo was right behind me, his hand resting on the back of my chair. Across the aisle sat Justin. He had shaved. He was wearing a navy blue suit that made him look younger, softer. He looked like a choir boy who had lost his way, not a man who had ordered a hit on his own nephew. Beside him was Marcus Sterling, the kind of defense attorney who cost $1,000 an hour and would defend the devil himself if the check cleared. Sterling's opening statement was a masterclass in fiction. He painted me as a tragic figure, a senile old man broken by grief, easily manipulated by a young grifter who happened to look like his dead son. He pointed at Leo with a look of pure disgust. He claimed Leo was a con artist who had brainwashed me to steal the inheritance. He claimed the DNA test was forged. He claimed I was the victim of a cruel hoax. It was a good story. But we had facts. We called Harlan to the stand. He walked up the aisle looking uncomfortable in a tie, but his eyes were sharp. He sat in the witness box and laid it out clearly. He explained the text messages, the VoIP routing, the triangulation of the signal coming from Justin's warehouse. He explained how we intercepted the meeting between Brittany and the hitman. The jury listened. I saw a few of them taking notes. Harlan detailed the technology with the precision of an engineer, explaining that the signal originated from a hardline connection that Justin paid for. Then Sterling got up for cross-examination. He did not attack the data. He attacked the man. "Mr. Harlan, isn't it true you have been on Conrad Blackwood's payroll for 30 years? Isn't it true you would do anything he asked, including spoofing a phone number to frame his son?" Harlan kept his cool, but I could see his jaw tightening. "I did not spoof anything," Harlan growled into the microphone. "I traced a signal." Sterling smiled a cold, reptilian smile. A signal that conveniently appeared just when your employer was about to lose control of his assets. A signal from a dead man. "It sounds like a ghost story, Mr. Harlan." And courts deal in evidence, not ghost stories. You created a digital phantom to help an old man justify his delusions, didn't you? Objection! Wallace barked from our table, but the damage was done. The jury looked at Harlan with suspicion. Sterling walked over to the exhibit table. He pointed at the sealed plastic bag containing the blue Nokia. He looked at it like it was a piece of radioactive waste. This, he announced to the room, is the crown jewel of their case. A phone that has been missing for 20 years. Suddenly, it appears in the hands of this young stranger. No chain of custody. No way to verify where it has been for 2 decades. He turned to the judge, his voice booming with theatrical outrage. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. For all we know, Mr. Blackwood bought this device on the internet last week and loaded a fake recording onto it. Its origin is unknown. Its authenticity is unverified. I move to suppress this evidence immediately. It is inadmissible. It is a prop in a stage play, not evidence in a murder trial. If you allow this toy into the record, you are making a mockery of this court. The judge looked at the phone, then at me. The room went silent. If that phone was thrown out, we had nothing but the word of a boy who didn't exist until yesterday. Justin looked at me and winked. The judge sat silently rubbing his temples while the objection hung in the air like smoke. The fate of the entire trial rested on whether a piece of 20-year-old plastic was considered trash or evidence. Wallace stood up, his movements slow and deliberate. Your Honor, before you rule on the admissibility of the device, I would like to call a witness who can establish its chain of custody. The state calls Leo Blackwood. A murmur ran through the gallery as Leo stood up. He looked small in the oversized suit we had bought him, but when he walked to the stand, his stride was steady. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. He sat down and looked out at the sea of faces. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Justin. Wallace approached the stand gently. Leo, tell the court where you got that phone. Leo took a breath. My mother gave it to me, he said, his voice clear. On her deathbed. She kept it in a lockbox wrapped in a silk scarf for 20 years. She told me it was the only thing she had left of the man she loved. Wallace nodded. And why did she keep it hidden, Leo? Why did she run? Because she was terrified, Leo answered. He turned his head and locked eyes with Justin. The defendant shifted in his seat, his arrogance replaced by a flicker of unease. My mother spent her entire life looking over her shoulder. We moved 6 times before I was 10. She checked the locks 3 times every night. She told me that the man who killed my father was powerful, and that if he knew I existed, he would kill me too. Justin's lawyer jumped up. Objection, speculation. The witness is hearsay. Overruled, the judge snapped. Go on, son. Leo leaned into the microphone. He looked at Justin with a hatred that burned cold and bright. You killed my dad, he said simply. You cut his brakes. And you made my mother live in fear until the day she died. You stole my father, and you stole my childhood. You are not a businessman. You are a monster who hunts his own family. The courtroom was dead silent. Justin stared back, his face a mask of stone, but his hands were gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. Wallace walked back to our table and picked up a worn leather book. He held it up. Your Honor, this is Sarah Jenkins's diary. We have authenticated the handwriting and the age of the ink. I would like to enter this into evidence. He handed the book to Leo. Turn to the entry dated August 14th, 2004, please. Leo opened the book. His hands trembled slightly as he touched his mother's handwriting. He read aloud. I went to see Tyler tonight. Justin was there. He was under the car. He had wire cutters. I was too scared to scream. I should have screamed. Leo looked up, tears streaming down his face. She saw you. She wrote it down the night it happened. And she wrote one more thing. Read it, Wallace said softly. Leo wiped his eyes. She wrote, Tyler is going to confront him tomorrow. He is recording everything on his blue Nokia. He keeps it in his inside jacket pocket. If anything happens to him, that phone has the truth. Wallace turned to the judge. Your Honor, the diary places the phone in the victim's possession and confirms the intent to record. It establishes that the witness's mother knew of the phone's existence and its contents before the accident even occurred. This is not a prop. This is the missing piece of the puzzle. The judge looked at the diary, then at the phone sitting on the evidence table. He looked at Justin, who was now whispering frantically to his lawyer. The judge picked up his gavel. The testimony combined with the diary provides sufficient authentication. He ruled, his voice booming through the room. The objection is overruled. The phone and its contents are admitted into evidence. I let out a breath and looked at Justin. He had stopped whispering. He was staring at the table, knowing that the ghost of his brother had just been welcomed into the court record. The noose was tightening. On the third day of the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. The air was heavy with the weight of the diary and the phone sitting on the evidence table. It was my turn to take the stand. I walked past the jury box. I walked past the defense table where my son sat, refusing to meet my eyes. The walk felt like a mile. I swore on the Bible and sat in the witness chair. From this height, I could see the whole room. I could see Leo looking at me with hope. I could see the gallery hungry for drama, and I could see Justin looking at his hands. Wallace stood up. He did not ask me about the night in the cemetery or the hitman in the warehouse. He asked me about the last 20 years. Mr. Blackwood, tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant after Tyler died, Wallace said gently. I took a deep breath. I gripped the railing of the stand. I trusted him, I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. For 20 years, I trusted him blindly. When Tyler died, I was broken. I could not function. I could not run the company. Justin stepped up. He took the reins. He came to my house every Sunday for dinner. He sat at my table. He drank my wine. He comforted me on the anniversary of the accident. I paused, looking at the jury. I wanted them to understand the depth of the betrayal. I thought he was the dutiful son stepping up to fill the void. I continued. I signed whatever he put in front of me. I gave him control of the accounts. I gave him the keys to the kingdom. I thought he was saving our legacy. I did not know he was the one who destroyed it. I was sleeping in a house with a viper, and I thanked him for the bite. Wallace nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. But I was not done. I did not step down. I turned my head and looked directly at the defense table. The judge started to speak, but I raised my voice. Justin, look at me. Justin's head snapped up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked exhausted, cornered, and dangerous. Why, I asked. The word hung in the air, simple and devastating. I gave you everything. I gave you the CEO title. I gave you the millions. I gave you the house. I gave you my unconditional support. You did not have to kill him to get the money. You would have had it anyway. Why did you do it? Justin's lawyer, Marcus Sterling, shot out of his seat. Objection, Your Honor. The witness is badgering the defendant. But Justin did not wait for the judge. He slammed his fist onto the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. He stood up, shoving his chair back so hard it tipped over. Because it was never about the money, he screamed. The courtroom gasped. Sterling grabbed Justin's arm, trying to pull him down, trying to shut him up. Sit down, you idiot, Sterling hissed. Justin shoved his lawyer away. He pointed a shaking finger at me. His face was twisted into a mask of pure, ugly jealousy. It was always Tyler, he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. Tyler the golden boy. Tyler the genius. Tyler the favorite. Even when he was alive, you looked at him like he hung the moon, and you looked at me like I was just the spare parts. Justin's tears were streaming down his face now. He was not confessing to a crime, he was confessing to a lifetime of inadequacy. And then he died. Justin yelled, stepping out from behind the table. He died, and I thought, finally, it is my turn. But no. Even dead, he was better than me. You spent 20 years mourning him. You built a shrine to him in your head. You sat at dinner with me, and I could see you wishing it was him across the table. I killed him, and you still loved him more than me. The silence that followed was absolute. The court reporter had stopped typing. The jury was staring at Justin with their mouths open. He stood there panting, his chest heaving, realizing too late what he had just said. He had not just admitted to jealousy. He had admitted to the act. I killed him. The words echoed in the silence. I looked at my son. I saw the broken, jealous boy inside the man. I felt a wave of pity followed by a wave of revulsion. You are right, I said softly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. I did love him. And I loved you too. That is the tragedy, Justin. You killed the only brother who would have protected you, and you broke the heart of the only father who would have forgiven you. But not for this. Never for this. Justin collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. His lawyer closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead, knowing the case was lost. The jury looked at one another, and in their eyes I saw the verdict written as clearly as ink on paper. The jury was out for less than 3 hours. In a murder trial involving complex financial fraud and a 20-year-old cold case, that speed usually means one thing. The evidence was overwhelming. I sat next to Leo, clutching his hand under the table. His palm was sweating. He was shaking not from fear, but from the anticipation of the end. When the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict, the air in the room seemed to vanish, sucked out by the collective holding of breath. Justin stood up. He looked small. The arrogance that had defined him his entire life, the swagger of the golden heir, was gone. He looked like what he was, a man about to be crushed by his own sins. The foreman, a middle-aged schoolteacher, stood up. He did not look at the defense table. He looked straight at the judge. In the matter of the People versus Justin Blackwood, on the count of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. A gasp rippled through the gallery, but the foreman kept reading. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder against Leo Blackwood, guilty. On the count of grand larceny and fraud, guilty. On the count of tampering with evidence, guilty. It was a drumbeat of justice. Guilty. 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 Each word was a hammer blow driving another nail into my son's coffin. Justin swayed on his feet, gripping the table for support. Brittany, sitting 2 rows behind him, let out a low, keen, a sound of pure despair. The judge did not waste time with sentencing dates. He had heard enough. He looked over his reading glasses at Justin, with eyes that had seen the worst of humanity, and found my son wanting. Mr. Blackwood, you have shown a level of callousness and depravity that is rare even in this courtroom, the judge said, his voice grave. You murdered your own brother for greed. You deceived your father for decades. And you attempted to murder your own nephew to cover your tracks. There is no rehabilitation for a soul this hollow. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. You will die within the walls of a penitentiary. Justin's knees buckled. His lawyer caught him before he hit the floor. The judge turned his gaze to the gallery. And you, Mrs. Blackwood, for your role in financing the hit on a young boy and conspiring to conceal these crimes, I sentence you to 25 years in a federal correctional facility. The gavel banged down, a sound of finality that echoed in my bones. And then the screaming started. Brittany collapsed into a sobbing heap, begging for mercy, but the bailiffs were already moving. Justin, however, did not beg. He snapped. As the officers grabbed his arms, he thrashed wildly, turning his face toward me. His eyes were wide and feral. "You did this," he screamed, saliva flying from his mouth. "This is your fault. I am your son. You cannot let them take me." "Dad, do something. I am your blood." I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. I looked at him one last time. I did not see my son. I saw the stranger who had lived in my house. I saw the man who had robbed me of Tyler. I looked him dead in the eye and said nothing. My silence was the final lock on his cell. "You are dead to me," I thought, but I did not speak the words. He was not worth the breath. They dragged him out the side door, his boots scraping against the floor, his screams of entitlement fading into the corridor. "I am a Blackwood," he howled. "I own this town." Then he was gone. The door swung shut. The room was quiet. As Leo looked at me, tears running down his face. "It is over, Grandpa," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "It is over." We walked down the center aisle together, ignoring the reporters shouting questions from the gallery. We pushed through the heavy double doors and stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The afternoon sun hit my face. It was bright. It was warm. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air of the city. It smelled of traffic and coffee and rain, but to me, it smelled like something else. For the first time in 20 years, I was not breathing through the weight of grief. I was breathing freedom. The ghost was at rest, and I was alive. The morning after the verdict, I put on my best suit. It was a charcoal gray three-piece that I hadn't worn since the day I retired. It smelled of cedar and old authority. I tied my tie in the mirror and looked at the man staring back. The grief was gone from my eyes, replaced by the cold steel of business. I drove to the Blackwood Construction headquarters in downtown Seattle. I did not take the service entrance. I walked through the front revolving doors with Leo right beside me. The lobby went silent. The receptionist dropped her pen. The security guards straightened their spines. They had all seen the news. They knew the king had returned and the prince was in chains. I walked past them without a word and took the executive elevator to the top floor. This was Justin's kingdom. The hallway was lined with modern art that cost more than my first house. The air smelled of expensive espresso and fear. I walked straight into the main conference room. Justin's inner circle was there. The CFO who had signed off on the fake invoices. The VP of operations who had looked the other way at the warehouse. The director of HR who had helped silence the rumors. They were huddled together like rats on a sinking ship, whispering frantically. When I opened the door, they froze. "Pack your things," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried across the room like a whip crack. The CFO stood up, adjusting his glasses. "Conrad, surely we can discuss this. We were just following orders. Justin was the CEO. We had no choice." "You always have a choice," I said, walking to the head of the table. "You chose the paycheck over the truth. You chose to help a murderer rob this company blind. You are all fired for cause. Security is waiting in the hall. You have 10 minutes to clear your desks. If you take so much as a stapler, I will have you arrested for theft." They did not argue. They saw the look in my eyes. They scrambled out of the room, leaving their coffees steaming on the table. The purge was swift and brutal. I wanted every trace of Justin's corruption scrubbed from these walls. Then came the hard part. The board of directors walked in. These were the money men, the investors. They did not care about morality, they cared about profit margins. They looked at the empty chairs of the executive team, and then they looked at Leo. Leo was wearing a suit I had bought him the day before. He looked young. He looked terrified. But he had his chin up. I stood at the head of the table. "Gentlemen," I began, "you all know what happened in court. The leadership of this company has been compromised. Effective immediately, I am stepping back in as chairman, and I am appointing Leo Blackwood as my successor and trainee." A murmur went through the room. One of the oldest board members, a man named Vance, who had never liked me, leaned forward. "Conrad, be serious. The boy is 20 years old. He has no degree. He has no experience. He has spent the last 2 decades hiding in motels. You cannot hand a billion-dollar infrastructure company to a kid who was waiting tables last week. The stock dropped 15% this morning. We need stability, not nepotism. I felt the heat rise in my neck. I looked at Vance. Then I looked at Leo. I remembered the way Leo had stood up to the hitman. I remembered the way he had testified in court. I slammed my hand down on the mahogany table. The sound echoed like a gunshot, silencing the murmurs. Stability, I shouted. You want stability? My son Justin had an MBA. He had 20 years of experience. He had all the pedigree you people love, and he used it to embezzle millions and murder his own brother. Experience is overrated, Vance. Integrity is rare. I placed a hand on Leo's shoulder. This boy has lived through hell. He has survived things that would break any man in this room. He has the Blackwood blood in his veins. He has the mind of his father, the best engineer this company ever saw. And most importantly, he is not a killer. That is the new qualification for this job. He starts today. If you do not like it, sell your shares. I will buy them all. Vance opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He looked at the fire in my eyes and realized I was not asking for permission. I was giving an order. The room fell silent. I pulled out the heavy leather chair at the head of the table. The chair Justin had sat in for 20 years. Sit down, son, I said to Leo. Leo looked at the chair, then at me. He took a deep breath. He nodded, and he sat down. For the first time in 2 decades, a decent man was sitting at the head of the table. We opened the first file. The work had begun. The house was a mausoleum. For 20 years, it had been a monument to a grief that was based on a lie. I walked through the hallway, listening to the echo of my own footsteps on the marble floors. This was the house where I raised 2 sons. One who died too young, and one who grew up to be a monster. Every corner held a memory, and now every memory felt like a poisoned dagger. I looked at the walls. They were covered in portraits. The Blackwood legacy. I stopped at the fireplace in the great room. There was a photo on the mantel taken 10 years ago. It was Justin receiving his MBA. He was smiling, that charming, predatory smile, his hand resting on my shoulder. I looked at it, and I felt a physical wave of nausea. I had been so proud that day. I had thought he was the future. I did not know I was looking at a parasite who was already feeding on the carcass of my happiness. I took the frame down. The heavy silver felt cold in my hand. I walked to the fireplace where the embers of the morning fire were still glowing. I cracked the frame against the brick hearth. The glass shattered. I pulled the photo out. The glossy paper felt slick. I did not hesitate. I tossed it onto the coals. I watched the edges curl. I watched the fire blister the image. I watched my son Els's smile turn black and crumble into ash. It was a cleansing, a purification. I went through the room. The graduation photos, the holiday cards, the press clippings of Justin's business achievements. I gathered them all. I fed them to the fire. One by one, I erased him from the walls, just as he had tried to erase his brother from the world. When the last photo turned to gray dust, I felt the air in the room change. The heaviness lifted. The house was not haunted anymore. It was just empty. I cannot live here, I said aloud. The words hung in the empty room. Leo was standing in the doorway, holding a box of books. He looked at the fire, then at me. He did not ask what I was doing. He understood. This house was built on secrets. It was stained with the invisible blood of his father. We could not build a new life on a foundation this rotten. We are leaving, I told him. Pack only what matters. Leave the furniture. Leave the art. Leave everything that reminds you of the past. We are starting over. I pulled up the listing on my tablet. I had found it 3 days ago. It was the complete opposite of this cold stone fortress. It was a ranch in the valley about 40 miles out of the city. 50 acres of green grass, an old wooden barn, and a house that smelled of pine and sunlight. It had a lake. A real lake, not a decorative fountain. It was a place where a boy could fish and an old man could sit on the porch and watch the sunset without looking over his shoulder. I bought it this morning, I said, showing Leo the picture. It needs work. The roof leaks and the fence is broken. Leo looked at the screen. A slow smile spread across his face. It looks like a home, he said. We spent the rest of the day packing. We took Tyler's old baseball glove. We took Sarah's diary. We took the blue Nokia phone. We left the expensive suits and the imported rugs. We left the trappings of the Blackwood dynasty behind. At sunset, I walked out the front door for the last time. I did not look back at the grand staircase or the chandelier. I walked down the driveway to the front gate. The realtor was already there, hammering a sign into the manicured lawn. The wood cracked as the stake went into the earth. She stepped back and wiped her hands. I looked at the red letters painted on the white wood. Sold. It was the most beautiful word I had ever read. It was the end of a chapter written in tears and the beginning of a book I was going to write myself. I climbed into the truck next to my grandson. Let's go home, I said. And for the first time in 20 years, I meant it. Before we drove to the new ranch, before we hammered the first nail into our new life, there was one debt I had to pay. It was a debt to a woman I had never met, but who had saved my bloodline while I was blind to the truth. We drove 4 hours south, crossing the state line into Oregon. We pulled into a town so small, it did not even have a stoplight, just a blinking yellow warning at the intersection. This was where Sarah had hidden. This was where she had waited tables and scrubbed floors to keep my grandson safe, while I sat in a mansion counting money I did not need. The cemetery was humble. It was nothing like the manicured park where Tyler was buried. There were no marble mausoleums or iron gates here. It was just a field of green grass surrounded by pine trees on the edge of a forest. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a blanket. Leo led the way. He walked with a familiarity that broke my heart. He had walked this path 1,000 times, probably alone, probably afraid. We stopped at a small gray granite marker near the back fence. It was simple. Sarah Jenkins, beloved mother. 17 years of hiding, ending in 6 feet of earth. I looked at the dates. She was so young. She had spent her entire adult life looking over her shoulder, running from the shadow of the Blackwood name. I knelt down in the dirt. My knees were stiff, but I did not care. I placed a bouquet of white lilies on the cold stone. My hands were trembling. I had faced angry mobs on construction sites. I had faced the man who killed my son in court, but this was harder. This was facing the innocent casualty of my family's sins. I touched the engraved letters of her name. I am sorry, I whispered, my voice choking in my throat. I am so sorry, Sarah. I should have been there. I should have protected you. You should not have had to run. You should not have had to die afraid. I bowed my head, letting the shame wash over me. I raised the wolf that hunted you. I let him live in my house while you lived in the shadows. I failed you, but I promise you this. I will not fail him. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was warm and steady. I looked up. Leo was standing over me. He was not crying. For the first time since I met him, the look of haunted vigilance was gone from his eyes. He looked down at the grave with a soft smile. She knows, Grandpa, Leo said quietly. She always told me that one day the truth would come out. She said that you were a good man, and that if I could just find you, everything would be okay. She held on for so long just to make sure I could get to you. I stood up and wiped my eyes. I put my arm around my grandson. The wind rustled through the pine trees. It sounded like a sigh, a long-held breath finally being released. "She can rest now," Leo said, looking at the stone. "He is in a cage. We are safe. The war is over." I nodded. The tension that had held this boy's life together, the fear that had driven his mother into an early grave, was finally gone. We stood there for a long time in the silence of that small town, watching the sun dip below the tree line. I had lost a daughter-in-law I never knew, but standing there I vowed that her sacrifice would never be forgotten. She had saved the last good part of my family, and now it was my turn to take over the watch. The last time I stood on this patch of earth, I was surrounded by blinding police lights and the screaming accusation of a siren. I was a desperate man in the dead of night, hunting for a ghost with a metal detector. I was chasing a suspicion that terrified me. Today, I walked through the iron gates with my head held high. The sun was shining. The sky was a piercing blue that reminded me of Tyler's eyes. There were no police sirens today, just the sound of birds singing in the old oak tree and the crunch of gravel under our boots. Leo walked beside me. He was carrying the small velvet pouch that we had brought from the courthouse. We stopped at the foot of the grave. The grass had grown back over the spot where I had scanned for the truth. The headstone looked different in the daylight. It did not look like a question mark anymore. It looked like a memorial. Tyler Blackwood, beloved son. For 20 years, those words had felt like a lie because I knew deep down that his story was incomplete. Now they felt like a promise kept. I knelt down on the grass. The earth was soft and damp with morning dew. I did not bring a shovel this time. I brought a small garden trowel, the kind you use to plant flowers. This was not an exhumation. It was a restitution. I carefully cut a small square of sod from the center of the plot, right over where his heart would be. I lifted the earth gently, setting it aside. I dug down just a few inches, making a small cradle in the soil. Leo stepped forward. He opened the velvet pouch. He pulled out the blue Nokia 3310. In the bright sunlight, it looked ancient. It was scratched and faded, a relic of a different time. But to us, it was more precious than gold. It was the witness that had spoken when no one else could. It was the shield that had protected Leo and the sword that had struck down Justin. It had carried a voice from the grave and brought down an empire of lies. Leo held it for a moment, running his thumb over the keypad one last time. He looked at the headstone, then down at the small hole I had dug. He lowered the phone into the earth, placing it gently at the bottom. "Your mission is done, old friend," Leo whispered, his voice catching in the breeze. "You can rest now." I watched the blue plastic settle into the dark soil. It belonged there. It should have been there 20 years ago. I picked up the trowel and began to fill the hole. I covered the screen. I covered the buttons. I covered the microphone that had caught a murderer's confession. I patted the dirt down firm and replaced the square of sod. I pressed it down with my hand, smoothing the grass until you could not even tell the ground had been disturbed. We stood up together. The secret was back in the ground, where it belonged, but the truth was out in the world. The heavy, suffocating weight that had pressed on my chest for 2 decades was gone. I looked at the grave, and for the first time I did not feel the crushing agony of loss. I felt peace. Tyler was not screaming for justice anymore. He was just sleeping. I put my hand on the cold stone of the marker. "We got him, son," I said softly. "We got him." Leo put his arm around my shoulders. "Come on, Grandpa," he said. "Let's go home." We turned and walked away, leaving the cemetery behind us. We left the dead to rest and walked back toward the living. The phone was buried, but the line was finally closed. The mist was still clinging to the glassy surface of the lake when we walked down to the wooden dock. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind that smells of damp earth and pine needles. We had been living on the ranch for a year now. The nightmares about the trial and the cold stone walls of the old mansion had finally started to fade, replacing themselves with the simple rhythms of nature. I sat in my folding chair and cast my line into the water. Beside me, Leo did the same. He was getting better at it. When we first moved here, he held the rod like it was a foreign object, but now he had the wrist flick down perfect. We sat there in the comfortable silence, watching the red and white bobbers float on the ripples. It was a scene ripped straight from my memory. 25 years ago, I sat on a dock just like this with Tyler. The déjà vu was so strong, it made my chest ache, but it was a good ache. It was the feeling of a wound finally healing over. The fish were stubborn that morning. We sat for an hour without a single nibble. Leo reeled in his line to check his bait. The worm was still there, looking just as bored as we were. Leo sighed and tipped his baseball cap back on his head. "You know, Grandpa," he said with a dry grin, "I think these fish are unionized. They are clearly on a mandated break." I froze. It was the exact same joke Tyler used to tell. Same delivery, same timing, same mischievous glint in the eye. The absurdity of it bubbled up inside me. A sensation I had not felt in 2 decades started in my chest. It rumbled up through my throat and burst out into the cool morning air. I laughed. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a deep belly laugh. It sounded rusty and strange to my own ears, like an engine starting up after sitting in a garage for 20 years. But once it started, I could not stop. I laughed until my sides hurt. I laughed until tears squeezed out of the corners of my eyes. Leo watched me, his grin widening into a real smile. He looked happy just to see me happy. It felt like breaking chains. The ghost of grief that had hovered over me for so long simply dissolved in the sound of that laughter. We packed up our gear around noon and walked back up the hill to the farmhouse. The gravel crunched under our boots. As we reached the porch, I saw the mail carrier had already come. There was a single thick envelope sitting in the mailbox. It was cream-colored and heavy. I pulled it out and looked at the return address. The University of Washington School of Architecture. My heart hammered against my ribs. I handed it to Leo. He took it, his hands trembling just a little. He tore open the seal and unfolded the crisp paper. He read it in silence, his eyes scanning the page rapidly. Then he looked up at me. He did not have to say a word. The joy radiating off him was brighter than the sun. He got in. He was going to be an architect. He was going to build things. He was going to take the genius that was in his blood and use it to create, not destroy. I pulled him into a hug. The cycle was broken. The darkness was behind us. We were just 2 fishermen standing on a porch, holding the future in our hands. The sun is finally dipping below the tree line, painting the sky over the ranch in shades of bruised purple and burning gold. It is the kind of silence you can feel. The birds have settled down for the night, and the wind has stopped wrestling with the pines. I sit in my rocking chair, the wood creaking a slow, steady rhythm against the porch floorboards. It is the only sound in the world right now, and it is enough. I look out at the lake where the water is turning into a sheet of black glass, reflecting the first stars. My mind wanders back to the beginning, to the noise and the anger, and the grief that almost swallowed me whole. People have a saying. They say dead men tell no tales. They say that once you are in the ground, your story is over. That is the biggest lie ever told. The dead speak. They speak constantly. They shout from the earth. They whisper in the drafty hallways of empty houses. They scream through the evidence we try to bury and the secrets we try to hide. The problem is not that they are silent. The problem is that we are usually too loud to hear them. We fill our lives with the static of business, with the noise of ambition, with the comforting lies we tell ourselves to sleep at night. For 20 years, I was deaf. I listened to the hum of money. I listened to the smooth, practiced assurances of a son who was a monster in a tailored suit. I let the noise of the world drown out the truth. But then the phone rang. It was a call from the past. Tyler called me. He reached out from the void across 2 decades of silence and betrayal. And for the first time in my life, I simply shut up and I listened. I looked through the screen door. Inside the warm yellow light of the kitchen, I can see Leo. He is at the table sketching on a large pad of paper. He is biting the end of his pencil just like his father used to do. He is planning a building. He is planning a future. I paid a high price for this view. I lost a son. I had to watch Justin be dragged away in chains, screaming curses at the man who raised him. I had to tear down the empire I spent 50 years building. But as I watched Leo turn the page, his face illuminated by the lamp, I know I got the better end of the deal. I lost a business, but I found a legacy. I lost a traitor, but I found a family. I looked down at the smartphone sitting on the small table beside me. The screen is dark, but I know it connects to the world, to the lawyers, to the news, to the noise. I pick it up. It feels heavy in my hand, not with weight, but with obligation. I do not need it. I do not need to check the stock price. I do not need to answer to anyone. The only message that mattered has already been delivered. I press the power button and hold it down. The screen glows for a second and then fades to black. I set it down face down on the table. Leo looks up through the window and waves. I wave back. I stop rocking. I close my eyes and I listen to the wind in the trees. It sounds like forgiveness. It sounds like peace. And for the first time in a long time, I am finally ready to just be. The most profound lesson from Conrad and Leo's journey is that truth is patient. You can bury it under money lies and time, but it never truly dies. Conrad spent 20 years building an empire on a foundation of deceit because he was too grief-stricken to look closer. It teaches us that justice has no expiration date, and that family is defined not just by blood, but by integrity and loyalty. Ultimately, we learn that it is never too late to right a wrong, to open our eyes, and to choose love over a hollow legacy. If this story of justice and redemption touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more emotional tales, and tell us in the comments, would you have been able to forgive yourself if you were Conrad?